my name is Cameron Brewer. I am the chair of the Downtown Norman Bid Formation Committee. This has been a committee of 6 members. Stephen Coranda and Daniel Johnson here have been 2 of our members, in addition to 3 other members that we have been basically meeting for the last 4 months, every other week on a Friday, to put together the plan that we're going to be presenting tonight. And I say that because we've been putting quite a bit of thought into to what the components of this plan. You'll see that there are some components that are relatively straightforward, and others that we've put quite a bit of thought into as far as the assessment structure to make sure that this is fair and as impactful as it could possibly be for downtown property owners and downtown businesses. So I am also a property owner in the district. I have a property at 315 East Gray. It's the old Norman Body Works building that we're converting into a large outdoor-indoor beer garden. So I say that because I have a vested interest in making sure this is done well and correctly, but I also say that anything that pertained to my property, I was very intentional about making sure that others were making decisions that impacted my property to make sure that this was equitable for a property owner being involved in this process. So, and lastly, the only other thing I'll mention, I work for Downtown Oklahoma City Incorporated, which manages the Downtown Oklahoma City Business Improvement District. Worked there for about 4 years. So very familiar with how a bid operates, not only how it operates, but also the impact it can have on a downtown. As I'm sure you've seen the growth of downtown Oklahoma City over the last 20 years. It's not solely due to the business improvement district itself, but I can tell you it's had a major impact and an important component to downtown Oklahoma City becoming what it is today. So what is a business improvement district? BIDs are organizations formed by private property owners within a legally constituted city district for a 10-year period. What that means is basically private property owners opt into assessing themselves an additional assessment to put back into a specific boundary area for services provided above and beyond city services. We'll talk about this a little bit, but downtown environments are unique to any other environment in a city. That's why a business improvement district is a good fit for a downtown area because it is unique to the rest of the city. So there are additional services that need to be provided, part due to pedestrian traffic, additional pedestrian traffic, in part due to just the nature of the built environment and a number of different factors. So why consider a bid for downtown Norman? A good way to think through a bid is called the 3 M's. It's maintenance, marketing, and management. Under those 3 buckets, there are specific services that are provided, and we'll talk through those. But in addition to those 3 M's, you also have improvements that can be made within the bid boundary area. Under maintenance, it's things like trash pickup. That's not just trash pickup on the ground, that's also emptying the trash cans and making sure that the environment is as clean as possible. Along with the cleanliness and just the overall appearance of downtown, power washing is a part of the business improvement district. Additional maintenance could include maintenance of street furniture. Landscaping is a key factor within a bid. We have only been adding landscaping, and we will only be adding more landscaping in our downtown over the future years. Of course, with the 100 through 300 block of East Main, there's a streetscape redesign about 13 years ago. The 300 blocks, the 3 blocks west of the tracks on Main recently had a streetscape within the last 3 years. All of those have landscaping and additional sidewalks that have been added. Gray Street, James Garner, Porter, all of those are undergoing streetscape redesigns. In all cases, they will have some component of landscaping. In the case of James Garner and Gray Street, they will have significant landscaping along those corridors. So that's something that aBID can maintain. In addition to that, I would say this kind of mixes and matches with maintenance and improvements. Something that we don't have currently in our downtown environment are things like seasonal plantings. That could be fall, spring, and summer, changing out the flowers in the flower beds to bring a much more inviting environment to kind of bring to the to match to what the season is. That's not something we do currently, and that's something that aBID can budget on an annual basis to bring a fresher environment and more beautiful environment to downtown. Marketing. We have a number of festivals that happen in downtown Norman. Whether it's Norman Music Festival, or in the past we've had Fall Festival or Pride, and a number, even not necessarily a festival, but Second Friday Art Walk, number of different events that occur. That's one of the advantages of having a business improvement district in place is in every one of those cases, those events are independent organizations that put them on. That makes coordination for independent organizations very difficult. Whether it's coordination on the city side, whether it's coordination for the organization itself to put on the event, coordination for property owners. Those are not easy to put on and they're not easy to coordinate. aBID centralizes a lot of that. That does not mean that Norman Music Festival will not be an independent organization that would put on Norman Music Festival, or that Norman Arts Council will not be the organization that would put on Second Friday. It's a constant coordination through an executive director, which is kind of to the next point of management, that this executive director has relationships with all business property owners, and so is a single point of contact to help coordinate, whether it's through petitions for street closures or just to make sure that everybody's in the loop as to what's coming next. I want to see more festivals happening and more events going on, especially as we discuss the impact of the SEC with Norman, in addition to the growth that we expect to see in the downtown area. This will help manage a lot of that. Advocacy for downtown specific issues. Mentioned that downtown is unique to any other environment in the city. That really what that means is there are issues that come up that are specific to downtown that may not be specific to any other area. That could be issues related to the unhoused. It could be issues related to festival management, as we talked about. It could be issues related to planning and code enforcement and things of that nature. aBID provides that single point of advocacy as a point of contact for the city, for city council members to advocate on behalf or of surrounding issues that affect downtown. And then just in general, marketing more robust social media. Something that we budgeted in the first year is a rebranding campaign for downtown Norman, to have a brand that people recognize. That's something that, having worked for downtown OKC, that's one of my favorite things is that the different districts, the brand that they have for each of those districts, whether it's for Midtown or Bricktown or Auto Alley, or Deep Deuce. Each of those districts, not only do they have an identifying name, they also have an identifying brand that people know and people recognize, and that's something that we feel it will be important to make sure we have a strong brand for downtown, especially as we expect to see a lot of this growth over the next 10 years. We talked about a single point of contact with the executive director as it relates to festival management. That any of the above is basically the job of the executive director, is to make sure that they're getting these things done. But again, it's that point of contact for property owners to direct, if a property owner has an issue going on or an idea of something they'd like to do, they know who to call. That's something that we're going to make sure that the executive director has the numbers of not only property owners but tenants downtown, and likewise they have their number, because that's something that they they need to be staying in contact because essentially it's a dedicated person to managing the downtown environment, which does not exist right now. Improvements, additional street furniture, completion of lights across Main Street. Improvements are interpreted at different levels by municipalities across the state. As an example, Tulsa built a downtown ballpark with their business improvement district. In Oklahoma City, the interpretation of business improvement district is that incremental, smaller improvements can be made. That's effectively how it's interpreted here in downtown Norman as well. That means, let's say, improvements of $1,000 or less, essentially, adding street furniture, adding trash cans, things of that nature. But that can also be a larger budget to essentially going in and redoing every landscaping bed to make sure they're brought up to date. So we'll touch on that here in a second. So why consider a bid as a property owner? We touched on a lot of this, but increased beautification downtown. Studies have proven that bids increase property values and business activity within bid districts across the nation, but not only across the nation, but here in Oklahoma. You have a reduction of crime, and this is really kind of the broken window theory of having a cleaner, safer, more inviting environment for downtown reduces crime in general. Increased occupancy rates and pedestrian counts. That's obviously something that we want to see in downtown. We want to see high occupancy. We want to see people enjoying the downtown environment. Improved walkability. We've come a long way in that regard already with improved walkability in the environment with the streetscape redesign we did with Main Street. That can be furthered by having a business improvement district with eyes on the street and thinking through specific issues, specific intersections where you can continue to improve walkability and make recommendations for the city for future projects and things like that. We talked about advocacy through a dedicated staff member and event coordination. So proposed bid boundaries. The proposed bid boundaries that I'll first say, when we were thinking through these boundaries, we were extremely thoughtful in thinking through first what would be excluded, and if it's a type of property type that's excluded that is based effectively on the border, we did our best to exclude that from the boundary itself. Single family is excluded. Single family isn't a great fit within a business improvement district. Think about how someone maintains a single family home in their front yard. They're typically taking care of their own front yard. Whereas a commercial building on Main Street, their front yard is a sidewalk. So most of that is public property. And it doesn't fit well within a rate structure either. So you kind of see a little bit of the jigsaw effect going on along Kanawha on the north side. Those are single family homes that were effectively carved out the border there. Religious institutions are excluded within the state statute for a business improvement district. 501c3 nonprofit, this is something we made a decision on to exclude 501c3 nonprofit. So this is for a nonprofit that owns their property and operates out of their property. So an example of that would be the studio at Sooner Theater. The Sooner Theater itself, the actual large theater, operates out of the city-owned building. However, across the street, the studio at Sooner Theater, the Sooner Theater owns that property, and therefore they're excluded. It's also important to note that just because they're excluded does not mean that we're not going to maintain the sidewalk in front of their property. We see that as, we see 501c3 nonprofits as a benefit to being within the business improvement district boundary. So of course, if there's a piece of trash in front of the studio Center Theater, it will be picked up as part of this. One distinction is that if you have a privately owned property that is leased by a nonprofit, that property is not excluded. An example of that is Norman Arts Council leases a space at the main site, and it's privately owned, so they will pay an assessment in that case. And then utilities, there are a number of different reasons why utilities don't really fit within a bid. And and really that doesn't affect most of this boundary. But the boundary itself, effectively on the south side, it goes down to Eufaula. On the west side, we're at the Commerce Building here. This is Copeland's across the street, and then this is Gray Street, so it kind of curves up to Tonawa. This is where you get into a little bit of city property, and here, and then Yellow Dog Coffee, well, I guess they just moved. Equity Brewing is this property right in here, and then you go up to effectively, I think Tara Kumara's up in on the north side, or maybe Vans Barbecue. And then you get to the 400 block of East Main, which includes Stash and the Mercury. And then it comes back down this way to the property that has Friendly Market and Nature Day Spa on the southeast side of the boundary border. So just to give you a little idea of, you can kind of think through not only visually with the map, but what that encompasses as well. And then next slide, same map we have here, but just talking through linear frontage areas. So you'll notice that Main Street, Gray Street, James Gardner, and then these side streets with Porter are different colors. What those mean, if you think about how services should be provided within a business improvement district, obviously with something like trash pickup, you're going to have more people on Main Street. You have more people on Main Street currently, and you expect more within a business improvement district. Therefore, trash will have a higher rate of pickup along Main Street than it will on Gray Street or some of the side streets. Now, that does not mean that properties that are not within these linear frontage areas will not have services provided to them. That's not the case at all. It just makes sense that you'd be picking up the trash more often on Main Street. So as part of that, the assessment structure that we put together, Main Street property owners will pay a slightly higher assessment, and then the next tier is Gray Street and James Gardner. Now, the distinction with Gray and James Gardner is that after the streetscape improvements are complete, which in the case of Gray is expected to be 2024, and then James Gardner 2025, that is when they'll move from the lowest level of linear frontage assessment into the second tier. And then the third tier for linear frontage are these side streets. And again, they'll be in the same tier as Gray and James Gardner, but when these are complete, the green will move into a second tier. So you'll have 3 different tiers, and I'll give you a little specifics on that. So the assessment structure itself is made up of 3 components: taxable value, acreage, and linear frontage, which is what we were just talking about. Easy way to think about this on an annual basis is that 1/3 of the budget will come from taxable value, 1/3 will come from acreage, and then 1/3 will come from linear frontage. And the taxable value, and I'm going to show you some examples of how this plays out for specific properties. Taxable value is 8% of 1% of a parcel's taxable value, and that taxable value is the annually determined value from the Cleveland County Assessor, which is what will be updated on an annual basis. Acreage is $1,100 for every acre of land. That's just as an example. Apple Tree Chocolate is a shotgun building on Main Street. That's a 0.16 acre property, which will pro rata off $1,100 would be $176 a year. And then those linear frontage areas, Main Street will be $750 per linear foot. James Gardner and Gray, when they move up into the second tier, will be $5 per linear foot. And then the Side Street, Porter, and the 400 block of East Main is $2.50 per linear foot. The reason the 400 block of East Main is not in the Main Street category, it's because they don't have landscaping in the same streetscape, so they're not going to have the necessity to have the same level of maintenance that the rest of Main Street does. So as examples here, 307 East Main, this is where the garage is. again, while I said the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 within an annual budget, it doesn't always play out that way for specific properties. Um, and some of that is because for a property owner who's owned their property for 25 years, we have a 5% annual cap on increases on taxable value on an annual basis in the state of Oklahoma.
Can you repeat that real quick right there, what you just said?
Yeah, so with taxable value, let's say a property owner has owned their property for 25 years, we have a cap in the state of Oklahoma that commercial property cannot increase more than 5% on an annual basis year over year. And so you think about that relative to a property that a property owner has owned their property for 2 years. When a property sells, their taxable value is reset to close to, if not on, the sales price of that property. So naturally, in some cases, taxable value will be suppressed relative to actual market value, and so you'll see a slightly lower taxable value assessment in those cases. That's also why we included an acreage assessment, because that offsets that a little bit. That acreage is going to be consistent across the district, so we felt it was important to not only include taxable value, but incentivize property owners to consider developing their property, or not unnecessarily penalize property owners who just recently purchased a property, especially given that they're investing in downtown, and that's what we want to see. And so in the case of 307 East Main, they have a linear frontage assessment because they're on Main Street. That's the same case with 227 West Main. This is the Gay Bird Dental building that was constructed about 5 years back. They're going to have a slightly higher taxable value because they're a newer property. They're going to have their linear frontage assessment because they're on Main Street. And then it's a relatively small site, so they'll have an acreage assessment, but not significant in that case. 401 West Main. This is Armstrong Bank. They are the highest individual property assessment in the proposed business improvement district. So that's why, as much as anything, we use that in addition to just being a differentiated example. Again, they have a taxable value. They've owned their property for quite a while, so that's slightly suppressed there, but they are on Main Street, so they have a linear frontage assessment. And then acreage, that's again based on the acreage of their property. So the highest individual property assessment in the entire district is $4,400 a year. Another example, we mentioned Equity Brewing earlier, 101 East Tanawa. Because they are not in those high service areas. They are not in the linear frontage assessment area, but they do have taxable value in acreage, and so that's $745 a year. So in addition to private property contributions, there's also a contribution from the city and county. And this is significant because this is fairly unique relative to many other cities bids across the state of Oklahoma. The first component with the city of Norman is that you think about obviously some level of service is being provided in downtown currently. Someone picks up the trash, someone sweeps the sidewalks. Our expectation and anticipation is that it will provide a much higher level of service. However, there is a base level of service provided now. So what we did, we discussed with the city that what services are being provided currently, and what does that look like on an annual basis as far as budget. And so each department at the city said, this is what we provide downtown, this is how much it costs. That equated to $57,000 annually. The city will be paying in $57,000 annually into the budget, in addition to private property ownership. In addition to that, the city owns property, and then Cleveland County also owns property within the district. What essentially we negotiated and determined was a fair assessment. City and county are not excluded from business improvement districts. um, governments at the state and federal level, being a higher level of jurisdiction, they are excluded. However, city and county are not. So we took a formula for the assessment based on average taxable value of all privately owned property within the BID district, and translated that to acreage of all property owned by the city and county, and came up with what is essentially $24,000 a year that the city will be contributing, and $18,000 a year that the county will be contributing. That will scale on an annual basis based off of average taxable value going into the next year. So if you see property sales, if you see property values going up, that average taxable value will increase. And just as an example, the city's contribution could go 24 to 26 the next year, depending on overall property value in the area. So again, this is a unique arrangement. Although city and county are not excluded, there's also there's really no trigger to make sure that they actually pay. We'll have a separate agreement in place to basically lock this in for the 10-year period of bid. And so that's that's nearly $100,000 contribution towards the $233,000 budget on an annual basis. I'd say, as an example of a public-private partnership, it's about as good as you're going to get as far as a business improvement district comes. So that's pretty neat, especially neat for private property owners in the area. So what that $233,000 annual budget looks like. So again, we organized the budget with those 3 M's: maintenance, marketing, management, and then improvements lastly. Maintenance, streetscape and landscape maintenance is $88,000. We have gotten bids from contractors, so that number comes directly from contractors who we potentially be contracting with. And so that's where that number comes from. The landscape, seasonal plantings, that came from directly from contractors or vendors really, to see what a fall, spring, and summer seasonal planting might look like. Marketing, it's $35,000. Again, first year rebranding campaign. That's a big chunk of that goes into that. So we can year one be off to a strong start to say this is what downtown is, and this is what we want it to be through that rebranding marketing campaign. Event sponsorships, I'd say that could go towards festivals. That's also a line item that among anything else, if the funds are there, then that's something we would use. But the others are key first year, making sure that they're all covered. Salaries and benefits, we talked about an executive director. This is a part-time executive director. I call it a little more than part-time. I'm looking at kind of a 25 to 30 hour type position. We feel that with the activity that goes on downtown and the assumption of how much work will be going into a bid on a weekly basis, that a 25 to 30 hour job makes sense. So we translated that to a reasonable annual salary.
What is that? I can't see it.
45,000. Yeah. We have rent, professional services, and technology. Professional services are, there may be attorney's fees we incur in the first year just to make sure that everything is in place. That also could be annual filings with CPAs, accountants, things of that nature. And then just necessary needs to be able to run an office as an employee, $4,000 allocated to technology, office supplies, things like that. And then this last line, this is another unique thing that I think is really neat. We have secured, I'd say verbally secured a 5-year loan against property assessments to essentially come in and redo all landscape planting beds from the 100 block to 300 block of East Main. When we did the streetscape redesign 14 years ago, there has not been a single update to any of those landscaping beds. This is our landscaping beds and what they look like today. This is what we want them to become. sear this into your image and be upset if it doesn't look exactly like this. However, with seasonal plantings, with thinking through a reimagining of what these landscaping beds could look like, it will look a lot closer to this than it does to that. But you don't, if beds aren't maintained and refreshed, that's what they end up looking like. And so we have essentially set aside a $100,000 loan for a 5-year period that will be amortized over that 5-year period with $25,000 a year for those first 5 years to not only go and put in new landscaping beds, but also make incremental landscaping improvements throughout the district or other improvements. As an example, the 400 block of East Main, we mentioned that there is no landscaping. They weren't part of the streetscape redesign. That's where Stash and Mercury are. We'd like to install some trash cans in that area. That's a high traffic, pedestrian traffic area. Install some trash cans there and include that as part of the maintenance program with the bid. And so, again, paying that over a 5-year period is a nice way to spread that out for property owners as opposed to having a higher assessment, higher budget year one, while making those improvements from day one that we can enjoy and see that improvement right away. And then at the end of the 5-year period, if we feel like enough improvement has been made, we may reconsider that budget. We may look at additional 5-year loans to end up in those 10 years to see, if it makes sense at that point to have the 3 blocks west of Main to refresh some of those beds. Although those are a lot more recent, so we talked to landscapers and they say there's a lot more we can do with those as is from a maintenance and kind of seasonal planning's perspective than you can east of the tracks that are in pretty rough shape.
Cameron, do you get no income from any of the festivals?
No direct income, no. But the city does, and so that it comes back around in some sense. But it's that's part of the, I'll call it festival coordination side, is that festivals will be required to come through the bid board to make sure that everything is in line with the interests of downtown as a whole.
Do you expect that income, when it comes back through the city, it comes back to you, will be enough to cover the trash pickup and all the cleanup and stuff that happens with it?
Good question. So this 88,000, in addition to the 3 times a week trash pickup and 1 time a week on the side streets, we've also, we went through the festival schedule for the year, and knowing, and I'll point out that it will still be part of the agreement, as Norman Music Festival, an example, that they're required to still pick up their trash. However, we know that it won't be 100%, and so we budgeted in for additional trash pickup on Saturday morning after every art walk, things like that. Kind of have like a separate menu of additional maintenance and trash pickup and cleaning that occurs after those events. So that's all been discussed and thought through with that bid. But great question, because you're right. That's part of the activity is you can have a consistent schedule, but there's an inconsistent festival schedule, so.
Can I ask a question? I'm on the treasurer for Norman Film Festival. So this year we're doing September, and before the Rona hit, we were going to partner with the music festival and do our film festival during music festival. All that changed when things started getting canceled. So like for this year, we didn't know until 2 weeks ago that we're going to do a September film festival this year. So assuming it's September next year, and assuming this is passing, would we need to notify this group, the bid group, to so that that's coming on a particular weekend?
Well, so you said the bid group. I think it's really the executive director is primarily, yeah. So that's something that we've worked in close coordination with Sarah Kaplan and thinking through. Sarah Kaplan is key to collecting signatures for permitting and street closures and things of that nature. So as much as anything, if you're applying for a permit with the city, the city's going to know to alert the bid and make sure that everything's connected there. And so that, but simply put, yes, and don't think of this as a controlling hand. It's just a matter of making sure that that everybody's on the same page and everybody knows what's going on. And a lot of that is not about telling you what you can't do. It's just making sure that property owners and tenants know this is coming and let's go promote it, you know? And that's a huge plus of a bid being in place from a promotions, social media, marketing standpoint. Is it's a central point where everybody over time knows that they can go to that one entity to know what's coming, what's upcoming. It's similar to our downtowners right now, except it's a $233,000 budget as opposed to a $10,000 budget. You know, so.
I think, Brad, if I can, it's
Good to see you again, by the way.
You know what?
Good to see you again, by the way.
I see you too. It's easier communication, so you need to get North Music Festival needs to get a street closing petitions and signs. It's easier communication out to the property owners and everyone in that bid now. Right now, you just gotta walk up and down the street, go to you ladies and say, hey, will you sign this, et cetera, et cetera. Now, it's just, hey, these people are coming out, and I can even see, online or some way, some form,
So, and with our festival, we do avoid the street closure part of it so that we skip the petition, because it's really not necessary to close the street for our particular festival. So we do have a lot of the local breweries, music venues and bars, including and staff and places like that, that either directly participate or indirectly participate. So we do have a good relationship with all the directly affected businesses that participate with this. That's one thing I do like about this, a little bit more coordination. North Music Festival has been around a long time, so, and I used to be on that board as well, so they've done a really good job over the years of consistently keeping business owners and property owners up to date and everything. So we're just kind of trying to do the same thing with the film festivals we slowly grow.
Yeah, and going back to like, do we need to get in contact with somebody? It will very much be to your benefit to get in contact with this person so then they can get the word out, you know.
And you don't know who the executive director is yet?
No, that will be, and I'll get into that in a second, just as far as kind of what governance will look like. And last thing I'll mention on the budget, I mentioned the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. We have a trigger in place that that in any given year, no more than 40% or no less than 30% can come from any one of those. Any one of these three buckets. So taxable value can be no more than 40% of the annual budget in any given year, or basically the total assessment. Likewise, linear frontage. This is really as much as anything in protection for linear frontage to make sure that from one year to the next year, the bid budget committee can't decide to jack Main Street up from $7.50 to $20 per linear foot. Their assessments can change on an annual basis. It's kind of based on like a zero-based budgeting system. It's like, what are the needs of the next year? And then you back into what the assessments look like. However, that trigger is in place to make sure that all three of these buckets are put in place in fairness to make sure that all property owners have a consideration with how they're assessed. And so you can't jack up the acreage assessment in any given year just because you feel like that's what needs to happen. And that's also a protection in place for anybody that's part of the bid budget committee on an annual basis that protecting them from personal interests as well. So to your question about governance, the bid board, there will be a separately formed 501c6 that will effectively be the governance board for the business improvement district. The bid board will be between 7 and 13 board members. Our anticipation in year one would probably be 9 to 11 members. 9 is just sounding like a good number for a few different reasons, but one key that was important, given that this is a private property driven assessment, basically creation as in general, a bid, is that at least 51% of the representatives of the board are private property owners. And that's to ensure that, that not only interest given that the bid ratepayers are private property owners, but also thinking from a budgeting perspective on an annual basis, that there's consideration of private property across a spectrum of private property owners as well. Also, there's outside of public representatives of the city and the county that will each have a seat because they are bid ratepayers based on the structure we proposed. These other three, nonprofits, tenants, and specialized expertise, that it's not a requirement, but something we see as important as being part of the board. Nonprofits, that could be representation from the Northern Arts Council, that could be Sooner Theater, that could be other nonprofits in the district. Tenants, obviously, we want a tenant perspective, businesses on the ground, what are they seeing? And then specialized expertise, you know, it often helps to have an attorney on the board to make sure that just from a board governance perspective that everything is going as it should. But it could make sense to have an accountant and architect, just depending on what the discussion is on over the next few years. Talked about a part-time executive director, and then we'll contract as needed. We mentioned we had a line item for $10,000 on an annual basis for professional expertise. That's what that is, whether it's bookkeeping, filings, any legal expertise that may be needed. But again, from a board, so to your question, how is a executive director, well, you asked if there's one in place. The 501c6 is current, we formed the 501c6 as of 2 weeks ago. There are no board members though. There were founding members. Those members will, not to say that you couldn't have the same member that is part of the board, but those members will resign and the new board members will be appointed. Our interest at this time is to think through private property owners as part of the board, and then once a board is formed, then an executive director search will happen. Question?
Who's going to appoint the board members?
So the bid formation committee is going to be a discussion about initial board members. However, if we have an agreement for board members, then we're going to loop them in as well. So that's what's a little tricky about forming a new C6 is how you go about that appointment process. But given the knowledge of the structure of how this whole plan was put together, the bid formation committee, with input from the downtowners as well, will appoint those initial members. And there was
voluntary.
one thing I was going to mention, but I lost it. So oh yeah, what I was going to mention was as far as process. I'll skip ahead to that with next steps. Our goal, we are 2 weeks out from July 1st. We'd like to have as many property owner petitions in hand by July 1st. Technically, we have another 45 days or so beyond that to get some additional petition signatures. However, we're making our strongest push, strongest goal to get as many property owner petition signatures to form the bid by July 1st. Consideration and adoption by City Council in early fall. This will be sometime in mid-September. So that's, again, why there's about 45 days beyond that July 1st period to have all petition signatures in, have your first and second hearing, and then potential adoption by council. And it's our expectation that By adoption by council, the founding board members will be, or initial board members for the first year, I should say, will be in place by that time. So that will be part of the discussion as well. And then from effectively, if the council adopts to January 1st, that's when a part-time executive director search will happen. The timing of this is key as well. If it's adopted by council in mid-September, then property owner assessment notices will go out in November. And property assessments will be due by either March 1st or March 15th. And we're in discussions with the city about options to spread out those payments. At the very least, we know that between November and March, we'll be able to spread out a assessment over that time period. And that doesn't mean that someone could pay a lump sum if they prefer to do that. We're looking into, there's a current ordinance in place that's preventing from spreading that out any longer than past March 1st, but City of Oklahoma City spreads it out over 10 months. And basically the requirement that someone opts into automatic ACH to pay that monthly. So we're seeing if that's an option. We may need to do a little work on the ordinance side. So whether that could be year one or not, it remains to be determined. And then the bid would officially begin January 1st, 2023. That means services would be provided beginning that day throughout the next bid year. So that's kind of the process from here. And then at the top here, the Oklahoma State statute requires that 51% of property owners sign a petition to create a bid before it goes to council for adoption. And that's based on total acreage of the proposed boundary area.
I have another question.
Yes.
What is the statute that governs the bid?
I was looking at it last night. I can send that to you if I get your contact information. So I don't have that off the top of my head.
Is the 51%, is that 51% of the owners or 51% of the parcels owned by the owners?
It's 51%. Yeah, good question. It's 51% of the parcels owned by the owners. Yeah. So.
So if someone owns more parcels, they get more of a say now.
Correct. Yeah. And likewise, they'll be paying a higher assessment based on the number of parcels they have. So. But I will say, not necessarily unique to urban areas, but downtown is a little unique, especially when you compare it to Campus Corner. Campus Corner is discussing a bid as well. Campus Corner, between 7 property owners, there's 92% ownership. In downtown Norman, there are 173 property owners or 153 property owners between 360 plus parcels. So it's a very segmented property ownership in downtown. The highest property owner, not being city and county, is roughly 5% total acreage in the downtown area. So bid benefits, we've talked about a lot of this, but just hire, improve, maintain public realm. One thing I'll say about a bid is that it ensures that the property next to you will be maintained in the public realm, just like your property is as well. It's in general just looking for ensuring that all of downtown is maintained, not just certain parts of it. Increased foot traffic, increased property values. I mentioned SCC earlier. Not to put her on the spot, but Laura's factory obscura as well. I'm hoping that all comes to fruition in downtown. We want this to be the most welcoming place it could possibly be. That means having a beautiful, clean environment that is highly maintained, and so our expectation with SCC Factory Obscura and just downtown in general is that it becomes a place where people outside of Norman would love to come and visit, and not only be there for the day, but potentially be there for several days or for the long haul. So seasonal planning, higher maintenance, advocacy. Again, downtown is different than anywhere else. in the city, and that doesn't mean that downtown property owners are more special than others. That's not what that means. It's just there's different issues in an urban area than there are in the rest of the city. And right now, there's no dedicated eyes on downtown to make sure that that is outside of volunteer downtowners organization. And then you're just keeping downtown great. So that's what I have. I'll mention that if you navigate to downtownnorman.com/BID, all resources and updates regarding the bid are posted there. We have FAQs that I'll pass around, and those are uploaded to that site. In addition to a copy of the full business improvement district plan that you are welcome to view, that has been reviewed and approved by the city attorney's office, and a copy of the petition as well. We also have a copy of every single petition for every single parcel right here, and they will be on site here at the Commerce Building through Visit Norman. And so if you know of anyone who would like to sign their petition, it'll be here at the building. You can also reach out to me. I have copies of everyone, and there's options for signatures. You can sign in person, you can do DocuSign, scan electronically, multiple options there. So yeah, that's what we have. Any other questions?